Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Ontario Association of Architects and our 2023 Council, I would like to thank you for joining us virtually for the OAA Annual General Meeting of members from your offices, homes, or wherever you might be. After last year's AGM, the OAA Council made a decision to decouple the meeting from the OAA's annual conference and host this event on its own in a virtual setting. This decision was based on the desire to offer a consistent approach and equal access, as well as to give all members the opportunity to participate. This decision was also consistent with feedback received from our members. My name is Settimo Vilardi, and I'm honored to be the OAA president for 2023. I hope that when you first joined us online, you were able to take a moment to see the names of our newly licensed members scrolling across the screen. We are also very proud of these individuals and congratulate them on achieving their license. We can all appreciate the hard work and dedication that goes into reaching these milestones. I will begin today's meeting by acknowledging the land in which we are collectively situated. For millennia, the place we call Ontario has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples and nations who have shared the stewards of the land. We honor the rich cultural and natural landscape of our buildings and spaces as part of and in connection to the land the Indigenous peoples have valued since time immemorial. We are grateful for Indigenous knowledge that guides us, and we commit to build in harmony with the land and create sustainable spaces for generations to come. I invite you to take a moment of reflection to acknowledge our shared responsibility to address past and present injustices and to provide spaces for Indigenous knowledge and worldviews to shape the architectural landscape of Turtle Island. Before we move to the business of the meeting, I would like to ask our OAA Executive Director, Christy Doyle, to take a moment to introduce the members of the 2023 Council.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Seth. Like Seth, I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon with you, with members virtually from across the province, but also from across the continent. And it is my great pleasure that I have this opportunity to introduce the 2023 members of OAA Council. Farida Abubakari, Lulua Al-Kasawat, Ida Badri, Bill Birdsell, Kimberly Fawcett-Smith, Christina Carney, Jennifer King, Natasha Cricken, Michelle Longlad, Laura McKendrick, Elaine Mintz, Dio Paquette, Clayton Paye, Greg Redden, Christiana Schumann, Susan Spiegel, Ted Wilson, Thomas Young, Marek Zawadski, and of course, OAA President Settimo Vilardi. It is important to recognize the efforts of these individuals and the hard work that they perform as members of Council. In addition to serving on Council, they are also spending their time serving on a number of OAA committees alongside other member volunteers and staff. And they carry out the work of the association. Thank you to our councillors for the dedication to the profession. Before I hand the floor back to Seth, we need to cover a few housekeeping items for today's meeting. I'd like to remind that the agenda and the formal procedures for this meeting were circulated to the membership in the electronic mailing sent on April the 3rd. I hope that everybody's had a chance to review those procedures in advance of today's meeting. Motions to be voted on during this meeting were also circulated with the agenda at that time. I would like to note that the meeting can only vote on matters that were contained in the agenda, and therefore new motions cannot be accepted today from the floor. Although we are open to receiving thoughts and suggestions from members under other business on the agenda, which will occur following the President's address nearer to the end of the meeting. For the purposes of preparing the meeting minutes, This meeting is recorded verbatim, and any questions that are asked will be attributed to the member accordingly. The chat function will be only used today for the dissemination of information and links to our audience as we move through the meeting today. And as always, voting will be conducted on the premise of honor and integrity of the individuals. And notwithstanding the virtual meeting is set up such that only eligible voters should be able to vote, all other meeting attendees should not attempt to cast a vote in any manner. The results of each vote will be tabulated in real time and announced to the meeting before we move on to the next agenda item. I also would like to finally confirm that one proxy vote has been received for the meeting today, and that named proxy holders voting has been weighted accordingly. And thank you everyone for the time so I could go over the procedures and housekeeping items. And now at this point, once again, it is my great pleasure to reintroduce your president, Settimo Vilardi.
Thanks, Christy. I became council president in January, picking up the baton from our now immediate past president, Susan Spiegel, who has been a great mentor during my time as senior vice president, treasurer, and extremely helpful and supportive during the transition process. She continues to be such a great colleague, mentor, and advisor. And as we come together to continue our work set on the OA strategic plan, which I'll talk about a little later during the meeting today. It's an honor to help lead the association's governing council. The names you just saw represent members of the architecture profession and the public from across Ontario. All different types of backgrounds, practices, and perspectives come together to make decisions in the name of public interest. And these decisions can have big impacts on the future of the profession as a whole, as well as really affect changes in practices and individual careers of our members. It's very important work. And later this year, there will be a chance for you to join council. While I have your captive audience, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the importance of upcoming council elections and encourage you to consider running when things get set up and in motion in the fall. This year, there will be up to 7 seats for election or re-election in OAA Council. For architects, our elections are based on geographic representation across the province, almost like ridings in the city of Toronto or Western Ontario. But it's important to remember that councillors do not represent members in their constituency. Instead, they govern on behalf of the public interest. It's part of a privilege and a responsibility of self-government that our profession has been entrusted by the government to provide this. Council works with OAA committees and association staff on activities ranging from the development of educational requirements and expected standards of practice to enforcing the Architects Act and working with all levels of government. Over the past year, we've made significant changes and important improvements to streamline our committees and distribute workloads relatively equally among councillors. This was spearheaded both by our operational and governance reviews. We're looking for people who can focus on the big picture and consider regulatory issues and make decisions without being influenced by the pressures from other sources. We want diversity in all aspects of background and perspective to truly be reflective of Ontarians. And if you think you, or maybe someone you know, would bring passion, clear thinking, and a collaborative approach to council, I encourage you to run. The nomination period begins in October, but if you have any questions or just want someone to convince you to join, you should definitely throw your hat in the ring. You can contact me at my email address, president@oaa.on.ca. Otherwise, we'll have more information about council elections later this summer in emails and on the OAA website. I run a busy full-service practice in Windsor, and I sincerely understand the effort we all put into our practices and for our clients. But I assure you, if you run and are elected to council, your time and effort will contribute significantly to the profession so we continue our important work to protect the public interest. Okay, that's my hard sell. Now, let's return to the business of the AGM and specifically celebrate the achievements of a number of special members. The next item of business is to recognize those of us who have been a member of the OA for more than 50 years, truly a remarkable achievement. We are pleased to recognize 8 individuals who have reached this milestone. The full bios and photos of these members will be available to view on the website a short while after the AGM. Before I begin, I want to mention that the OAA reached out to all of the new members of longstanding. Some of these individuals expressed a desire to remain private and accept this recognition in their own way, and therefore will not be providing their personal details. With this in mind, it's my honor to simply congratulate Stephen Propst and Robert Woodman on their great achievement and continued dedication to the profession. Our next member of long-standing is Stephen Bernatt. Stephen graduated from what was then known as the Ryerson Institute of Technology in 1964 with a diploma in architectural technology, and the University of Toronto in 1968 with a Bachelor of Architecture degree. After graduation, he worked for several architectural firms before launching his own private practice in 1976. Over the past years, Stephen has designed all kinds of building types, including senior citizens apartments, residential condominiums, townhouses, private custom residence, and institutional buildings. Stephen says the variety of these building types, along with the diverse and very interesting people involved, have made work fun and pleasurable. In 1986 or 1987, Stephen designed the office building for one of Canada's first multilingual broadcast outlets, Chin Radio TV International, at 622 College Street in Toronto. This building was also connected to a seniors apartment building. Incorporated into the design was a green pea parking garage that was deemed to be the most efficient parking structure to date, according to the Parking Authority. I understand Stephen was the first architect in Toronto to create computer-aided architectural drawings for building permit using software from the aviation industry. This was before AutoCAD. Everyone gathered around to see them when they were presented, as it was such an unusual and unprecedented use of the computer. These days, Stephen continues to work on unusual projects and has no immediate plans to retire. Next, I would like to recognize Robert T. Grossmann. Robert joined Adamson in 1966, shortly after earning his master's in architecture from Harvard University. Robert made an impression early in his career when he made a personal project of the firm's entry to the 1967 Winnipeg Art Gallery International Design Competition and earned Adamson second prize. Robert became a partner in 1974, and during the 80s and 90s led such important projects as the North American Life Center and DuPont's Canadian headquarters. Robert was the driving force behind much of the firm's high-profile work in Toronto during this era, and he forged relationships with local developers, city officials, and contractors that still benefit the firm today. A partner at Adamson until 2004, Robert continues to lead his expertise to the practice and projects as a special consultant. Some of the more recent developments that have benefited from knowledge and experience include Telus House at 25 York, Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital, and the Mississauga Urban Design Award-winning Waterside Executive Center. Robert was also integral to the Toronto Pearson International Airport new terminal development. This recognition has special importance for me, as Robert gave me my first job in architecture while I was still a student at U of T. I'm not sure if they were really desperate or just saw promise, but I'm grateful. I worked there until I graduated and continued for a few more years until moving back to my hometown of Windsor to a firm I currently co-own with my business partner. Congratulations again, Robert, on your amazing career, and thank you again. I'd say your decision 20 years ago was a good one, and hopefully I will have the same success as you did. Next, the OAA would like to recognize John Hackett. John graduated with honors from the University of Toronto School of Architecture in 1967. In 1969, he joined the predecessor firm of Carruthers Shaw and Partners Architects, and in 1983 became principal, retiring from active practice in 2004. During this time, John served as a principal in charge of many educational, recreational, and institutional projects in Ontario, several other Canadian provinces, and Bermuda. In March 2004, John joined Prodemnity Insurance Company, which provides mandatory professional liability insurance to Ontario architects. As the Vice President, Practice Risk Management, John's responsibilities have included the development and delivery of more than 150 loss prevention risk education programs for Ontario architects, as well as assisting thousands of individual architects and practices deal with specific risk management concerns. John has been a regular contributor to the bulletins and claims avoidance advisories offered by Prodemnity through its website and the Straight Line. John is a member of the OAA and past member of the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta Associations of Architects. In 2002, he was made a Fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. In addition, John has served on the Canadian Commission on Building Codes and Fire Codes, the RIC Certification Board Committee of Examiners, and the OAA Competitions Committee. He is an honorary life member of the Georgian Bay Association and a founding member of the Georgian Bay Land Trust. In addition to working with architects, John enjoys travel and quality time at the cottage with Liz, his wife of 54 years, friends, family, and 4 grandchildren. I wanted to extend a personal note of congratulations to John on his illustrious career, having had a great pleasure of working with him during my time as VP Practice and Senior Vice President Treasurer as an interlocking board member for both the OAA Council and Pro-Indemnity boards. John is truly a fountain of very critical information for all architects. Thank you, John, for supporting the profession for all these years. Next, the OAA would like to recognize Wayne Murray. After graduating from the School of Architecture at the University of Toronto in 1967, Wayne worked for Donaldson, Nelson, Chapman Architects in Niagara Falls for about 18 months. He then went to the Caribbean to work on the design of a new hotel in Barbuda and on renovations to an existing one in Antigua before returning in 1970 to take his admission course. Wayne became a member of the OAA in 1972. He was an associate in the firm by 1975 and a partner 5 years later. The firm name was changed to Chapman Murray Associate Architects, Inc. around 1985. Don Chapman retired in 2000 and Wayne became the sole practitioner. He is considering retirement in 2025 to 2027, but he doesn't really know yet. Since 1972, Wayne has been fortunate to have been involved in over 3,000 different projects, primarily hotels and restaurants in the Niagara Peninsula, though he has been involved in projects in Toronto, New York, Belgium, Kishim, and Bangladesh. Wayne married in Niagara in 1972. His wife, Sue, left her Toronto career and went to work at the Pillar and Post, where the firm had just completed the first phase of hotel rooms, restaurants, and meeting rooms at the time when Niagara on the Lake was just starting to be discovered. A few years later, she was the general manager, and they acquired a financial interest in the Pillar and Post as it continued to expand. Wayne and the firm then designed Queen's Landing Hotel and shortly after Harbor House, a boutique hotel near the marina. He became his own client for all the tourist commercial developments in the Old Town and acquired a small ownership position in the mall. While he no longer has financial interest in any of the hotels, he remains a resident and says he continues to be active by trying to protect the charm and heritage of the Old Town by resisting incompatible and excessively large and tasteless proposals that he says show up all too often for rezoning. These challenges take a great deal of time, but he still goes into the office every day, except half of the winter and half of the summer, as he feels he can still make a meaningful contribution overseeing the amazing CAD work done by his firm's talented staff, and by sharpening the pencils that only he uses. Wayne has enjoyed a long and satisfying career as an architect, and at times as his own client, which he strongly recommends his architects consider to ensure that they get the buildings that they want. Next, I would like to recognize Salomon Wassermuhl. Saul grew up and studied in Montreal, graduating from McGill University School of Architecture in 1969. Upon graduation, he joined the established Toronto firm Page Steel Architects, working on diverse projects including office, hotel, residential, and institutional uses. Saul was registered as an architect with the OAA in 1973, and working his way through the ranks, became an associate in 1980, a partner in 1989, and eventually senior partner in 1992. Saul was inducted in the RSC College of Fellows in 2001. Page & Steel continued to grow to over 100 staff with diverse and loyal clientele, building numerous office buildings, hotels, and residential projects, as well as complex mixed-use developments. Saul was a founding member of the Toronto Design Review Panel for 3 years. The firm had largely been Toronto-based. To diversify and expand the practice and to avoid the pitfalls of a local recession, Saul merged the firm with IBI in 2007, establishing a multidisciplinary firm with offices around the globe. Saul led the architecture practice as director of Page Steel IBI Architects, while nurturing and mentoring the next generation of leadership from the ranks of the old Page & Steel practice. IBI recently merged with Arcadis, a multinational firm, and Saul continues to practice with Arcadis IBI Group, generating new projects, designing special projects, and lending his experience and mentoring the next generation. Over the course of the last 50 years, he's designed and realized a diverse portfolio of projects, winning many design awards from Toronto, North York, Etobicoke, Brampton, Mississauga, and Oakville. Next, the OAA would like to recognize Mykola Wasylko. Mykola graduated from the University of Toronto with an honors Bachelor's of Architecture degree in 1969. On graduation, he was offered a permanent position at at Ronald Murphy Architect Office in London, Ontario, and was given the opportunity to work on many projects for what is now known as Western University. In 1972, Mykola joined Matthews Group, a large local land developer. A year later, he received his license and, given an opportunity by Don Smith of Ellis Don to design a new office complex, Mykola started his own architectural practice. In 1979, Mykola associated with two London architects from Breivik Skorji forming Breivik Skorji Wasylko Architects Inc. Several years later, the firm added a fourth partner, Richard Morrison. The firm was active in designing buildings across southwestern Ontario for 19 years until Mykola again became the sole principal of his firm in 2002. Mykola has been a member of the RIC since 1973. He continues to work on a wide variety of institutional and commercial projects and has enjoyed working with his sons at his firm over the past few decades. Again, thank you and congratulations to all these individuals for their perseverance, dedication, and longstanding contributions to our profession. I now call on Executive Director Chrissy Doyle to take a moment to recognize OAA past councillors whose terms on council ended in 2022.
Thank you again, Set. On behalf of OAA and our governing council, I am pleased to take this opportunity to acknowledge the contribution of 4 past councillors: intern architect Pearl Chan, architect Paul Hastings, architect Andy Thomson, and Lieutenant Governor and Council appointee Gaganjot Singh. These individuals have made important contributions to the OAA and to the profession during their time on council. We do have a framed certificate of appreciation for each of these individuals, and they will be invited to join us at conference in Sudbury in June to receive their certificate. I'd like to take a moment to read a short citation for each of these individuals. First, I'd like to recognize Pearl Chan. Pearl served as the OAA's intern architect representative on council for 2022, and she quickly fit into her role as she was no stranger to the OAA and to the work of the association, given that she had previously held the position of OAA's architectural graduate for a one-year term where she worked directly with staff and volunteers. Pearl contributed enthusiastically to council discussions, providing a fresh perspective on the many issues discussed and debated during the year. She served on the interns committee and was key in the research and development of the new online mentorship database for interns. She also helped bring together last year's Meet the OAA in partnership with the Toronto Society of Architects and did a wonderful job as MC of the virtual event. On behalf of council and the association, we extend our sincere appreciation to Pearl and wish her success as she embarks on her career in architecture. Next, I will read the citation for Paul Hastings. Paul is one of OAA's long-serving councillors. Originally elected back in the 2000s, he served for 3 terms from 2005 right up to 2013. He then made his return to council in 2020. Paul spent all of his last term on council as a member of the executive committee in the role of vice president regulatory, and he contributed directly to the regulatory work of the association in this capacity. Paul was always direct and to the point and worked tirelessly to raise awareness for the practice of architecture. His focus on public safety was steadfast and in turn regulation to protect the public interest. Paul was always willing to hear input from all sides, yet stood strong in his beliefs and positions on certain subjects and matters. We wish him all the best and know that he will now have more time to spend with his grandchildren and family. Now I'd like to take a moment to recognize Gaganjot Singh. Gagan participated on OAA Council in the capacity of Lieutenant Governor and Council appointed by the government for a 3-year term, which began in April 2020. In the midst of the pandemic, we didn't actually get to meet Gagan in person for almost 2 years. It was such a pleasure when we finally got to meet him. Assigned the role of the Complaints Review Counselor, Gagan was tasked with a number of CRC reviews and reports during this time. Gagan's insights as an LGIC representing the public interest is very much appreciated. Gagan's passion to help facilitate the transition for newcomers into Canada was apparent through his thoughtful contributions and discussions related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is an important lens of the OAA strategic plan. Goggins' term on council was brief. However, his enthusiasm and contribution is recognized and acknowledged. On behalf of council and the association, we extend sincere appreciation to Goggin and wish him well. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to recognize Andy Thomson. Andy served on the executive committee in the role of Vice President Strategic in his very first year on council and continued as a strong contributor at the council table following that. He is a great advocate for addressing climate action and served as chair of the Sustainable Built Environment Committee, where he was integral in the development and implementation of the OAA's TEUI calculator and the need to demonstrate energy saving aspects in order to be eligible to make submission for consideration in the OAA's Design Excellence Awards program. As chair of the Policy Advisory Coordination Team, or PACT as we know it, Andy undertook to ensure that our submissions and feedbacks to government and affiliated organizations clearly identified aspects of climate action and environmental issues and impact. Throughout his term on council, he was a key member of the building committee, ensuring the renovation of the OAA's headquarters was designed and performed to expectations to reduce the carbon footprint in our environment. He also served as the OAA representative to the Construction and Design Alliance of Ontario and the OAA OGCA Joint Practices Committee. Andy, we wish you well in your future endeavors. My sincere thanks to these four individuals and to the contribution that they have made. I will now hand the meeting back to Seth. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. A great bunch of councillors. I had the opportunity of working with them all, very dedicated to protecting public interest. So I'm glad to honor them here at the meeting. On a more somber note, it's with great sadness that I would like to ask everyone to please observe a moment in silence to recognize those members and past members who have passed away since our last meeting. Thank you. I will now call this meeting to order for the formal business section. No amendments to the agenda have been identified, and therefore the agenda will stand as circulated. The next item of business is confirmation of the synopsis of the minutes of the 132nd Annual General Meeting, which was held on May 12, 2022. I will now ask if there have been any errors or omissions identified. We will pause for a moment to allow feedback. Please use the Ask the Question function.
Said at this point, I'm not seeing anything coming into the Q&A section.
Okay. Seeing no corrections identified, I will move forward with the motion and voting. For the purposes of efficiency, we have arranged for movers and seconders in advance. Our OAA member, Andre Sherman of Toronto, has agreed to move the motion to accept the synopsis as circulated, a copy of which was sent to all members on March 28, 2023. And OAA member Tara Bisharat of Toronto has seconded the motion. The motion appears on the screen, and as noted by Christy at the outset, please cast your vote when the voting option appears. I will now ask all members eligible to vote to cast their vote. We will pause for about a minute to allow time for the votes to be cast.
point in time, I'm happy to report that the motion is passed.
Excellent. The next item the next item is business arising from the minutes. Is there any other business arising from the minutes of the 2022 AGM? We will pause for a moment here to allow for questions to be entered into the Ask the Question function.
But at this point, I'm not seeing anything coming into the Q&A. If it does come, we can circle back at the end, but I think we can probably move on.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to the next item of business. The next item is the appointment of an auditor. OAA member Joelle Leon Denise of Toronto has moved the motion, and Emily Featherstone of St. George has seconded the motion to appoint Grant Thornton LLP as auditors for the OAA. I will now ask all members eligible to vote to cast their vote. We will pause for a minute to allow time for votes to be cast.
At this point, I'm happy to report that the motion's passed.
Excellent. The next item is the confirmation of the amendment to the OAA Bylaws Revised 2022 and Schedule A, which was emailed to members on April 3rd, 2023. The bylaws have been amended to reflect the names of current standing committees as a result of our recent governance review. Intern technologists have been added in considerations with respect to the committee appointments, as well as to reflect the fees with Schedule A. Schedule A has been amended to reflect an increase of fees of 1% for 2023. In accordance with the Architects Act, bylaws made by council are subject to confirmation at the next annual general meeting of members. All members will have received a copy of the amended bylaw and Schedule A, which was approved by council on November 24th, 2022. OAA member David Sind of Toronto has moved the motion, and William Lett Jr. of Peterborough has seconded the motion to approve the amendments to the OAA bylaw revised 2022 and Schedule A to the OAA bylaws. I will now again ask all members eligible to vote to cast their vote. We will pause for a minute to allow time for votes to be cast.
That I'm happy to report the motion is passed.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Christy. The next item is the appointment for honorary membership. Honorary members are a class of persons whose interests are related to those of the association and defined in Regulation 27 under the Architects Act as persons who have rendered the architectural profession signal or valuable service or have scrupulously upheld the objects of the association. This year, we have two individuals who have been nominated for honorary membership, Brian Massey and Blaine Nichols. The names of these individuals were contained in the official agenda emailed to members on March 28th, 2023. I would like to recognize OAA member Suzanne Steers, who has been kind enough to share her nomination for Brian Massey and move the motion to elect him as honorary member in the following pre-recorded message.
We move the motion to nominate Mr. Brian Massey, MP, Windsor West. As a dedicated public servant, Mr. Massey has served at various levels of government, initially sitting on Windsor City Council, and since 2002 as Member of Parliament representing Windsor West. Mr. Massey has labored tirelessly for our region, its community, and the built environment for over 20 years. His work resulted in the protection of existing neighborhoods and the establishment of a community benefits plan to fund areas directly impacted by the construction of the new Gordie Howe Bridge. He also lobbied to ensure that the materials used in the construction of this new international crossing be manufactured within North America. In addition, Mr. Massey has participated in various committees surrounding topics of regulations, technology, industry, and science, and included involvement in the recent More Homes Built Faster Act. Most recently, Mr. Massey initiated the Ojibwe National Urban Park Bill, which will designate lands bordering the Detroit River as protected under Parks Canada. The designation of these lands will honor Indigenous history, as well as protect environmentally significant and rare species of plants and animals. Architects play a leading role in creating more culturally engaged, ecologically sustainable, socially just, and artfully conceived environments. As first nominated by Mr. Bill Kaczmarek, Mr. Massey has shown a commitment to preserving and promoting architecture and environmental sustainability in our region. For these reasons, we move the motion to nominate Mr. Brian Massey, MP, an honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects.
I understand that OAA member William Kaczmarek of Windsor has seconded the motion. I will now ask all members eligible to vote to cast their vote. We'll once again pause for about a minute to allow time for the votes to be cast.
That I'm happy to report that the motion is passed.
That's excellent. Thanks, Christy. Thanks, everyone. Next, I would like to recognize OAA member Luis Belanger, who has kindly pre-recorded his nomination for Blaine Nichols and moved a motion to elect him as an honorary member.
I, Louis Belanger, hereby move to nominate Blaine Morris Nichols to be recognized as an honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects for his exceptional services and dedication in the inception of the MacEwan School of Architecture in Sudbury. This is the first School of Architecture to open in Canada in 45 years. The 12th accredited school in the country et la première à offrir des cours en français hors du Québec. This new institution will generate countless cohorts of graduate architects, educated in the North, inspired by the North, and most importantly, interested in practicing in the North. Beyond Blaine's illustrious career of over 32 years, he has continued to advocate for our profession and the promotion of the role of architecture in our everyday, especially in the North. Be it be moved that Blaine Morris Nichols be elected as honorary member of the Ontario Association of Architects.
I understand that the motion has been seconded by OAA member Amber Salich of Sudbury. I will now again ask all members eligible to vote to cast their vote. We will pause for a minute again to allow enough time for votes to be cast.
That I'm pleased to report that the motion is passed.
Excellent. Thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Christy. The next item is the next item on the agenda is the 2022 annual report, which was made available via the OAA website on March 15th, 2023. Immediate past president Susan Spiegel would like to share a few thoughts from last year with you. In the interest of efficiency, she has also pre-recorded her remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Seth. I'm not going to summarize the whole annual report right now, but I would strongly urge you to read it. It's on the OAA website, and I think we're also going to put a link in the chat so you can find it. It's interesting when you look at these reports because they try to capture information in a particular moment or snapshot in time, 1 year. But really, the work of the OAA is continuous, stretching well beyond a 12-month cycle. A lot of the highlights in the report began before my time as OAA president. Some started in 2020 as the pandemic first hit, and others when we began to really fully acknowledge and become proactive in our role in the climate crisis. And while a lot of work in the annual report began before me, a lot of it continues after me, with the baton now belonging to Seth and a new crew of eager councillors and so many newly licensed professionals who are getting involved. I want to talk a little bit about our 5-year strategic plan, which was published last year. And just to back up a little bit, the OAA had an operational review in 2021 to ensure that we were fulfilling our provincial mandate to regulate the architecture profession in the public interest. Across the country and in numerous fields, regulators are coming under increased scrutiny, and the association needed to ensure that what we were doing was what we were supposed to do as part of our privilege of self-regulation. So the OAA worked with the executive director, Christy Doyle, and the firm of Kathy McLaughlin and Associates to develop a clear strategic plan forward for the association. There was detailed consultations and quite a process to help reconfirm our mandate with a commitment to defining our lanes as a professional regulator. The process allowed us to better refine the responsibilities of council, as well as our relationship with OAA staff who offer a continuity throughout the years. And this process allowed the creative work of identifying strategic goals and priorities for the coming years. So in some ways, this strategic plan is the next step in a very big picture of the OAA Renew and Refresh plan that began with our headquarter renew and renovation, which was imagined 7 to 10 years ago and has been completed in the last years. It continued with our new visual identity and website and led to the operational review previously referred to. The strategic plan has 4 foundational goals or pillars that we are continuing to pursue until 2027, when we reevaluate our progress towards measurable targets. It solidifies 2 commitments to 2 very important environmental and social governance themes: climate action and equity, diversity, and inclusion. These 2 themes are the lenses through which all of the OAA's work is viewed. For climate action, we recognize that the construction and operation of the built environment has substantial impact on greenhouse gas emissions. This means an educated, skilled architecture profession that is able to design a resilient, sustainable built environment is paramount for the public interest and the planet. We are ever cognizant of the massive weight of the climate crisis. With all the housing needs that we need to address and all the long-term care homes that are required, we also need to have green oversight. I'm very proud of some of the tools that the OAA is offering, like the TEUI calculator. We're also modeling our green mandate at the OAA with the climate performance of our renovated headquarters and now our new landscape plans for the land. As a regulator, the OAA is focusing programming to ensure that members have the education and resources needed to incorporate climate-stable design approaches in both new construction and renovation. We're partnering with other industry stakeholders to strengthen the code requirements and to raise public awareness about architecture's role in lowering environmental impacts. And to the EDI lens of the strategic plan, as a regulator, we must ensure that the architecture profession reflects the diversity of the people it serves. That means both the path to licensure and the environments in which our members practice must be equitable and inclusive and include a diversity of voices and perspectives to strengthen the capacity for architecture and the allied arts to create spaces for that public. We've been implementing our regulatory framework and programming with this obligation to remove barriers on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, physical abilities, and religious practices. As an important component of this work, we are committed to ongoing reconciliation and partnering with Indigenous communities to collaborate on meaningful projects. Our president, Settimo Vilardi, is going to speak later in more detail regarding the pillars of the plan and progress we are making. But if anyone has questions about the 2022 annual report, please post them now in the Q&A box. And thank you.
Thank you to OAA's immediate past president, Susan Spiegel, for her remarks. If you have any questions regarding the annual report, please ask them now in the Q&A box.
I'm just watching the Q&A. I don't see anything at this point. If there is, we can, oh, there is a very long question. I'm just reading it right now. Perhaps we could move on so that I could understand the question. And what I'll do is when we come back to other business at the end of the meeting, we'll raise this question. If that's
Sounds like a great idea. Yeah, thank you for that. So I would now like to present the 2022 audited financial reports. As my part of my role today, I'm going to revert back to my responsibilities from last year as Senior Vice President and Treasurer. My year-end report, excuse me, my year-end report as SVP and Treasurer regarding the financial performance of the OAA over 2022, as well as a result of the OAA's annual audit, is contained within the annual report as noted earlier by Susan. The OAA's financial statements for the year ending November 30th, 2022, including the independent auditor's report, were also posted on the OAA website in concert with the annual report. I hope that you have had a chance to review these statements prepared by Grant Thornton LLP, Chartered Accountants. As reported by Grant Thornton, the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the Ontario Association of Architects as at November 30th, 2022, and its results of the operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for nonprofit organizations. The statements and the auditor's report were reviewed and recommended for approval by the OA's Audit Committee in February and then approved by Council. The OAA continues to be in strong financial position, and the OA's finances continue to be well managed and with the appropriate level of oversight by Council. We continue to see the membership grow in 2022, which resulted in increased income from member renewals. As was expected, our expenses increased for the headquarters, office services, and operating as we exited the pandemic. The increase in this area is also attributed to expensed portions of the final payments to close out our building renovations. At the close of fiscal 2022, our members' equity was sitting at around 46,567,000 compared to 45,032,241,000 in 2021. Each year, we take this opportunity to remind members that of the total amount, 33,392,693,000 is related to the OA's investment in Prodemnity Insurance Company, and some of the growth over 2021 can be contributed to our investment in Prodemnity. Another key objective of Council over the years has been to place focus on the OA's 3 reserve funds that make up the remainder of members' equity. As the balance sheet shows, the major capital reserve fund totals 1,250,226,000. The operating reserve is at 1,148,127,000, and the legal reserve is at 202,500,000. The use of these funds is restricted by the the Association's reserve fund policies. The OA's Finance and Audit Committee, in cooperation with Association staff, have been working to develop a plan to ensure these funds are sitting at the appropriate minimum amounts, as defined by each of the fund's respective policy into the future. As part of the exercise, part of this exercise has been aided by the adoption of a building reserve fund study, which provides clear guidance in terms of contributions and adequate funds in order to maintain the OA's headquarters building. In addition to these restricted amounts, a further 3,706,089 remains unrestricted members' equity, which can be used as additional contingency to offset resulting shortfalls or unbudgeted expenditures or unanticipated revenue fluctuations. It is generally anticipated that a non-for-profit organization like the OAA may accumulate surplus funds for operating purposes up to the equivalent of 1 year's operating expenses without jeopardizing its non-for-profit status. Again, I invite you all to review the 2022 financial statements available on the OAA website. I will pause for a moment to see if there are any questions entered in the Q&A area. Yeah, Christy, can I ask if you see any questions for the financial statements of 2022, let me know.
Yeah, I'm just monitoring that now. I don't see anything on the financials at this point in time, Seth.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you, Christy. Moving forward from the 2022 financial year to the OA's 2023 finances, I would like to invite this year's Senior Vice President Treasurer, Ted Wilson, to provide a few remarks.
Thank you, Settimo. After reviewing the first quarter financial statements, I can report that the OAA finances are tracking normally with the continued careful oversight of management and council. Our 2023 operating budget was established with a hybrid approach in mind regarding our operations and administration, as well as our council and committee meetings. The OAA's return to office policy has allowed for ongoing opportunities for remote work, as well as holding meetings virtually. This is consistent as well with our commitment to sustainability and reducing our carbon footprint. You'll have read in the annual report information about the OAA's continued work regarding the operational review and the 39 recommendations made. We engaged a strategic planning consultant to assist with the development of a long-term strategy to ensure the association's guiding principles and actions are in line with our regulatory responsibilities as set out under the Architects Act. Specific costs associated with those recommendations, including enhancement of our IT infrastructure and database management, are incorporated into the 2023 budget. I'm working with management to formalize a number of policies and procedures in order to ensure we have documented our financial procedures as a best practice and to create further transparency and accountability. Also, recommendations stemming from the operation review. I also want to refer back to Seth's comments regarding our focus on the OAA reserve funds. I can confirm that the Audit and Finance Committee will further its discussions in the coming months ahead as we begin to develop the 2024 draft budget regarding fiscally responsible planning to build the reserve to the appropriate level, as Seth has mentioned. Another important aspect is our consideration of moving some of the monies that are essentially sitting in our unrestricted reserves into those allocated restricted reserves. It's good opportunity to infuse funds that we already have in those reserves and achieve the minimums required. We're also diligently paying attention to the reserved fund study that Seth spoke about and emphasize our commitment as a prudent building owner to see the OAA well positioned to maintain the building as our major asset going into the future. Major capital expenditures underway in 2023 included the modernization of the OAA's elevator and an upcoming design competition for the OAA's landscape and site. So that covers my comments on the first quarter financial statements. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, or I will redirect to our staff as required.
That I'm just watching the Seth and Ted. I'm just watching the chat or the OAA Q&A. I don't see anything at this point in time.
Okay. So now, as interlocking director to Prodemnity Insurance Company, I have the pleasure of welcoming the new chair of the board for Prodemnity, Deborah Krakow. Deborah will provide a brief overview of Prodemnity's activities over the past year.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'm Deborah Krakow. I'm the chair of Prodemnity Insurance Company, and I bring you greetings from the board, the staff, and the management at Prodemnity. I've been an architect for over 30 years now, and for the past 6, I've been on the board of Prodemnity. And looking back, I am very proud of everything we've accomplished as a company. We've brought in some very talented, motivated people who together have made a lot of changes. We've streamlined our processes, we've strengthened our operations, we've improved our fiscal position, and we've become more client-centric. But at the core, our focus has remained unchanged. We are entirely focused on providing top quality, competitive, professional liability insurance to all of the architectural firms in Ontario. So today I'd like to highlight some of our achievements of the past year and talk a little bit about some of our initiatives going forward. Risk is an inherent part of architectural practice because every project brings new challenges, and we're here to help you wisely and effectively manage those risks. We're here to be your trusted ally, to protect and defend you and your families against the risks associated with architectural practice. And we strive every day to be trustworthy, accountable, collaborative, and innovative. We're here to protect your practice. I mentioned that we've become more client-centric. Our CEO, Bruce Palmer, in the past year has visited individually with many of your firms and has also met with all of the architectural societies. Understanding your needs is at the core of everything that we do. We want to make sure that you feel protected and can succeed at every step. We're focused on improving our financial position to make sure we have the resiliency and the strength to withstand future challenges. We're strengthening our operations and making sure that we have a culture that can attract and retain top talent. Prodemnity is now financially sturdier than we've been at any time over the past decade. So let's look at some of our 2022 fiscal numbers. We pay very close attention, as does our regulator, to our minimum capital test ratio. That's our MCT. And that's the ratio of available capital to the capital that's required to meet our policy liabilities. So you can see that right now we're within our target range, but we're at the lower end of that range. In 2022, we were able to grow our equity by $585,000, which is really important because as the profession grows, so do our liabilities, and we need to have more and more capital just to stay even. Our total claims costs in 2022 were $19.1 million, which was a $2.2 million increase over the prior year. And of that, about 2/3 went to defend architects and 1/3 was paid out in damages and settlements. We're working to keep our annual rate increases as low as possible by making sure that our operations are efficient and that we're really constraining our expenses. So let's go over some of the highlights of 2022, and I'll talk also about some of our upcoming initiatives for this year. So in 2022, we launched our Architectural Claims Stories podcast. And if you've listened to any of these, you know that they're entertaining, but also very educational. They're very human stories about some of the situations that can lead to claims. And you can find them on our website or through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We also updated our claims management system to make sure that we're providing the best possible service to architects facing claims and that we're handling claims in a more efficient and effective manner. And our legal team won an important case this year at the Ontario Superior Court involving an interpretation, or I guess a clarification, of an architect's role coordinating other consultants. Coming up in 2023, we have a lot of initiatives on the go. Some of the key ones, we're going to be starting a review of our policy wordings and pricing. The policy wordings have remained unchanged for many years, but in the meantime, the services that architects provide have continued to evolve. And we want to make sure that we're providing offerings that are really tailored to the needs of architectural firms. We're going to be putting more educational material on our website. So you're going to see more enhanced case studies. You're going to see a new season of our podcasts, as well as articles on topical and emerging risks. And our in-house team of architects, Sal Knafo, Leslie Parker, and John Hackett, who provide one-on-one confidential consultations with architects, will be available through an online booking system. So that's just a few of the initiatives that we have underway. And I would encourage you to visit our website, prodemnity.com. And you can download our annual update for more information. You can also, if you haven't already, you can subscribe to The Straight Line, which is our monthly newsletter. And as I mentioned before, you can download the podcasts. So thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Deborah. We're just pausing to see if we get any questions before moving on.
I'm not seeing anything except for Deborah or on the financials. There are a couple of questions, but we can circle back to those at the end.
Great. Well,
Okay.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and for you and the entire board and the staff at Prodemnity, including Bruce. I've had the opportunity of obviously working with all of you, and certainly can personally attest to the dedication and work that goes on there, and that it's being very well managed. So thanks again. So this is the part in the AGM where I get a chance to address those in the profession, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for participating today. For many years, the annual general meeting has been part of our annual conference, an event you can attend in person, and if you're a licensed member, vote on matters. But when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we pivoted to an online format for a couple of years before opting for a hybrid approach in 2022. After exploring a few different options and combinations, we made the decision to keep the AGM virtual. It improves our accessibility and inclusiveness, helping ensure those in the profession can attend from across the province. Immediate past President Susan Spiegel spoke earlier about the development and the implementation of the OA's 5-year strategic plan, which we had the pleasure of announcing at last year's AGM. Again, if you haven't seen the plan, you can visit the OA website at oaa.on.ca and scroll down a bit to click on the vision, mandate, and strategic plan to learn more. For this afternoon, I would like to take a few moments to look at the strategic plan's 4 pillars in a little bit more detail and provide insights into a few other of the specific activities and initiatives we have accomplished and have underway. The strategic plan's first pillar is to bring the OA's regulatory framework into alignment with current legal principles for professional regulators. It's also to modernize our legislative and governing documents and ensure the public interest continues to be served and protected. This involves a range of activities, including examining how someone is licensed in the province, whether they are educated in Ontario or outside of Canada. It encompasses how the OAA approaches complaints, discipline, and act enforcement, as well as those council elections I mentioned earlier. Over the last year, the OAA has ensured we remain in full compliance with the requirements of the Office of the Fairness Commissioner, and through the Office of the Registrar, we continue to respond to ongoing consultations with respect to the Fair Access to Regulated Professionals and Compulsory Trades Act, or FARPACTA. We put in a few new policies and procedures and enhanced our training for regulatory committees and functions. We continue to share options for broadly experienced foreign trained architects to achieve their license in Ontario. And we have also transitioned our experience requirements recording program to online rather than pen and paper. I'm pleased to say we've had such a good response to our newly launched mentor directory, which allows interns to search for mentors based not only on practice-based information, but also other types of identity criteria. Our annual demographic survey has shown that there's value in enabling mentors to voluntarily share more info about who they are in order to foster a supportive, more inclusive, and equitable profession. We've begun our work on modernization of the Architects Act, regulations, and bylaws, a considerable task with many moving pieces, and Council has made a clear commitment to this project and the time and resources necessary to see the project through. On the policy and government relations front, we continue our legislative monitoring for regulatory matters affecting the built environment, the profession, and the public. We've been able to have our voices heard when it comes to topics like site plan approval reform, long-term care research, housing affordability, and building code changes. We have also shared concerns about the environmental impacts of Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act, and found other productive ways to keep working at all levels of government. The OA's Practice Advisory Services team, which includes both architects and retired members, has participated in multiple reviews related to national codes or the Ontario Code, exploring and suggesting proposals related to harmonization, accessibility, and climate action. The association is closely tracking the 2024 OBC revisions, especially the items related to changing energy efficiency code requirements. We participated in all ministry feedback rounds and continue to be proactive in educating the membership on the changes. I myself operate a practice in Windsor and take part in every aspect of a project from schematic design through to construction administration. Like many of you, I work daily with these codes, and therefore these items are very important and personal for me as well. Speaking of work, we also continue to voice concerns about Employment Standards Act reform to ensure fair treatment of those in the profession, and also remind of the importance of fair pay and truly valuing our interns and newly licensed professionals. The next pillar, member competency, involves ensuring the continued and current professional skill sets of the OAA licensed members, as well as maintain our leadership role in the built environment while being accountable to the public interest. This can take many forms, such as the association's mandatory continuing education program, as well as its bi-weekly Con Ed webinar series, which allows members to learn from industry experts on a wide variety of topics. This includes climate action, which we have also made a required credit for the current cycle. For intern architects, there's the emissions course, and its information can also be accessed for members via our self-study series offered through the University of Toronto. We also offer the virtual and always very popular Fundamentals of Running an Architectural Practice course. I'm actually one of the instructors for that. If you're thinking about starting your own practice or leveling up on your current one, I can't recommend it enough. In terms of help for both members and also the public, the OAA Practice Advisory Services team has answered more than 2,100 calls or emails to their free online OAA hotline last year. They also reviewed unfair RFPs and updated numerous documents, practice tips, bulletins, and other member resources found on the OAA website. The Practice Advisory Services team led the renewal and updating of our entire suite of OAA standard contracts, which were revised and rewritten in consultation with construction law specialists representing owners, contractors, and consultants. These fair, balanced contracts are available on the website for both members and the public. As well, it's through Practice Advisory Services that the OAA offers its licensed members free access to all CSA standards mentioned in the building code, along with other standards related to aspects like bird-safe design and modular construction. This speaks not only to ensuring member competency, but also our mandate to protect the public interest. We're removing barriers to accessing these standards for all architectural practices to help ensure the built environment that meets these stringent requirements. The third pillar calls for enhancing our governance and operational practices to make sure we have effective, inclusive, resilient, and a transparent organization. The OAA has more than 6,000 members and status holders and a staff of 37. There are 14 active committees, all governed by a council of 21 that meets 7 or 8 times a year. As Susan mentioned earlier, out of the operational review and strategic plan exercises, we moved directly into a governance review that resulted in quite a few changes to the various committees and structures that we had at the OAA. We needed realignment to reflect a good governance, and best practices. Our 5-year strategic plan reinforces our focus on our regulatory mandate. It's a reminder that the OAA and Council are here to serve not the profession, but rather the public interest. Of course, a strong, skilled architectural profession benefits the public interest, but at the same time, we are not a lobby group or an advocacy body. We're happy to support local societies, other stakeholders, and other groups in the industry, but the OAA has a specific mandate under the provincial statute, and we need to make sure our governance and committee structure speaks to that. This year, we continue to make improvements on the OAA website, the virtual headquarters for all members, as well as behind-the-scenes upgrades on our member directories and databases. While the major renovation and refresh of the OAA's headquarters building is complete, we continue our commitment as a responsible building owner to address ongoing maintenance and upgrades. This includes additional bird-friendly films for its atrium, building security enhancements, an accessibility audit, and a soon-to-be officially announced landscape design competition. We're also continuing to monitor and will be sharing energy and building performance shortly to substantiate our net zero objective. In fact, we're looking at ways for members like you to share your own climate performance so we can all benefit from the innovative ideas and lessons learned. Later this month, the OAA will allow practices to post their own case study projects on the website for the public to view. We also continue to share resources related to climate action on the website, and I look forward to unveiling some exciting news about our free Total Energy Use Intensity Calculator 2.0, or the TEUI.ca, later this year. We'll continue to share news and connect with you via our website and social media, and we are also looking to update our e-newsletters in terms of look and content. We'll also be reaching out to you shortly to fill out a little bit more about what you need to know and what you want to see in your communications from the regulator. The final pillar calls for advancing the public's understanding and recognition that architecture is integral to the quality of life and well-being of our society. We've been doing this sort of public outreach for a while now, trying to educate about the importance of a sustainable, resilient, and durable built environment. But I'm pleased to say we have greatly begun to amplify our efforts. Our new Communications and Public Education Committee will be involved with OAA staff in an audit of our current ways the OAA communicates with the public. And by public, I mean everyone from clients to government to teachers and students to others in the design and construction realm. Through staff dedicated to public outreach, we'll be working more closely with our 14 local societies, which really have the most direct ties to our communities and are better equipped to operate a little bit differently than a traditional regulator. In fact, we will soon be co-hosting a big think about the current landscape of K-12 education with the Toronto Society of Architects. We are looking to share more resources about climate action outside of our membership, and those case studies I mentioned as part of the plan. We also made the TEUI metrics a mandatory requirement for the Design Excellence Awards to continue to shine a spotlight on that particular aspect of building design. Speaking of awards, we just announced our jury's 5 selections for the Shift 2023 Health and Architecture Challenge. This program aims to show the public how architectural thinking can be applied to find new approaches to society issues, in this case related to the physical and mental health. Later this month, we'll welcome the public into our headquarters for Doors Open. We'll be exploring a similarly based public-focused Shift event at the building in the fall. I'm also excited to announce that the OAA will soon be launching a public-facing podcast, Architecturally Speaking, that aims to demystify architecture and the people who practice it. This is in addition to our more focused outreach like Procurement Day with the Construction and Design Alliance of Ontario and special planned client education webinars to springboard off the revised contract suite I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, we continue to support the other regulatory organizations of architecture in Canada to support a national architectural policy. And we're well underway with our plans for World Architecture Day in October, which includes unveiling of this year's Queen's Park's picks, favorite buildings as chosen by our MPPs. Finally, I want to remind you that registration is open for the 2022 OAA conference, which takes place next month in Sudbury. We kicked things off a couple of weeks ago with a wonderful virtual keynote, which will soon be available on the OAA YouTube channel if you missed it live. So even if you saw it live, I'd say have another look at it. The conference theme is Designing for Dignity, and it's going to be a really unique 3 days of networking, learning, and special events, including a celebration of this year's Shift selections, Sudbury's Kitchen Party, and a plenary that brings together an array of experts to look at design in the context of care, community, wellness, and dignity. You can also look at the full lineup of continuing education opportunities on the OAA website. This year, there will be learning sessions at Laurentian University and the McEwen School of Architecture in award-winning buildings like Place des Arts and an event even out in the field. You'll be able to earn Con Ed points while taking part in case studies and exploring architectural sites in and around Sudbury. Also, we've extended our early bird pricing until Monday, which means you should register now to take advantage of the significant discounts. There's also special pricing for those who have OAA student or intern status. I'll close the address by reiterating my earlier encouragement to consider running in the upcoming council elections. There will also be volunteer opportunities to join an OAA committee, which will be announced in the summer. Just by the very fact of participating virtually in today's AGM, you're showing that you care about the profession and about its future, as well as how it can best serve the people of Ontario. I hope you continue to think about ways you can further become involved at the association or at the local society level. As council continues to make real the priorities of the strategic plan, there will be a place for you to join us. Thank you. At this point in the meeting, we would like to provide you with an opportunity to offer council any additional comments or feedback, and we'll also hear some of those questions that were provided earlier. If you wish to do so, please ask your question in the Ask a Question function. We'll also be addressing questions that were raised earlier, as I mentioned. If we have more questions than time allows, we'll be responding to these questions post-meeting in a post-meeting report, citing the questions and preparing responses. Please note that questions that are similar in nature will be grouped together and will be addressed as one response. And so I'm going to pass it over to Christy to let me know what the questions are, or let us know what the questions are, and we'll do our best to respond.
Sure, thanks, Seth. I have a couple of questions, and the first one is related to, there's been a request for an update regarding the AATO court challenge and also the status of the OAA technology program.
For sure. So in regards to the AATO court challenge, unfortunately, it's a legal matter at this time, so we can't really provide a lot of information. It's with the courts, and based on that, At this time, we can't provide any detailed information other than what we've reported on the website. Hopefully, we'll have a resolution soon, at which point we can provide the entire membership, including the licensed technologist, additional information about that court challenge. And the second item was in relation to the interior.
No, Seth, the second part was in relation to the actual program itself.
Oh, the program itself, okay.
If I may, I could just jump in and say that the information that was provided to members previously in the OAA news remains current. So we are not issuing any new licenses at this point in time or new applications, but those that are in the program are continuing within the program. So that is the current status. So that has not changed. And I guess I could just add that one of the notes and comments in the information that's already gone out to members is that, council remains committed to addressing the matter in the best way possible and in a fair and equitable way for those that may be affected. Okay, so I will, if it's all right, Seth, I will move on to another question, and I'm actually, it's lengthy. I'm going to paraphrase this. I think one is, it's two parts, and it's related to the strategic plan, and one is part is about the modernization of the Architects Act, and so I think you touched on that a little bit in your address that you just gave. But the question really relates to whether the modernization is related to, I guess, benefits of the architect or the public, and I don't know whether you want to address that or.
Well, I mean, obviously any Ontario legislation is to the benefit of all Ontarians, architects included, I guess, those of us included as well. And certainly, the purpose of the Act modernization is because it hasn't really been undertaken in, I think, over 40 years. We haven't really updated it. And of course, there's some outdated language and references. And of course, there's been a lot of changes to the profession and to the organization over that time period. And although it's a challenge, obviously it's a substantial document, and any piece of government legislation comes with a lot of work in order to revise it. We decided this year, and like we said in our address, the council did commit to finally trying to get this done. Of course, with any piece of legislation, we require the cooperation of government, the Ministry of the Attorney General in particular, and of course they will ultimately affect the change. And ultimately, although we provide language and revisions, it's ultimately their responsibility, and they are empowered to actually make the changes in the Act. And so we've been working with them, or have worked with them obviously over the years, but now we've made this a focus, and we've had started some conversation with them, and they're of course receptive to us making these changes, obviously for the purposes of modernizing the Act, as we mentioned. And so it'll be a bit of a long process, but I think it's important, as Susan, our media past president, mentioned. It's been something that's been ongoing. We've started it. It was part of our strategic priorities, and obviously our council is seeing this through. And one of my particular interests as president this year was that strategic plan, and to do my best, because I was part of the commencement of it, to really see it through to this next stage, and some of these major items we're working on.
Great. And the second part of that question was perhaps more of a comment, but just about what's happening in British Columbia. For those that aren't aware, the AIBC, which is our counterpart, has in the profession there, has been subject to a new act under the auspice of a Professional Governance Professions Act. And so just as a side note, we are absolutely monitoring that and understanding what's happening there, and looking at what those different pieces of that legislation are as part of our exercise. There is another question. There's a question about conference for this year, whether there was a virtual option for conference. I can quickly answer that. There is not this year's conference in Sudbury is an in-person event. Okay. There's another question that has to do, I'm sorry, I'm reading it from the screen, which is why I'm looking away for a moment. Homelessness may be critical. Many of our major municipalities and even smaller urban areas. Will the OAA sponsor and assist local societies with efforts to provide architectural assistance to nonprofit groups assisting homelessness or the homeless?
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is absolutely yes. I mean, we're fully in support of our 14 local societies. One of the major ways we support them is with funding that we provide on a yearly, or sorry, twice yearly this time. And as a council, I know that I've certainly been part over the last years of increasing this funding year after year because we really do feel that the societies are the real connection to the communities, and certainly homelessness, although it's you know, a provincial, national, international issue. It starts individually at the local societies and municipal level, and so I think if our council, excuse me, if our societies are involved in any kind of initiatives that support ending homelessness or mitigating it to a certain extent, the OA would certainly support that. Obviously, you know, our main thrust is with respect to government legislation, and we try to respond to that. As we had noted earlier a couple of times, the More Homes Built Faster Act are trying to combat issues of homelessness. And so, of course, any initiative that creates more homes quicker to solve or to help solve certainly the homelessness in our province is an important one, and we've supported that, but also we try to balance that with sustainability or climate concerns. And so, you know, like everybody, we sort of balance a fine line between wanting to work with government on initiatives and also pushing back on some items that we feel may be affecting the public interest, specifically related to climate stability.
Right. Thank you, Seth. Another question, I think maybe we've got time for one more. I know we're at time actually, and I think some people are starting to drop off. Had a question about the OAA, your comment said about the OAA not being an advocacy group or lobby group, and the connection then to the fact that we are registered on not only the province of Ontario lobby registration, but also the City of Toronto. And I'm not sure if you want to take that, or I can certainly answer that from an operational and legal perspective, if you'd like me to do so.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I know the response because we certainly talked about it before. There's certainly more closely associated with that. So please respond. Thank you.
It's a good question, but we've had you know, debates over the years, and yes, anyone who wants to speak to approach and work in consultation with the government on certain things needs to be on the lobbyist registration. So it doesn't mean you are a lobbyist group. It doesn't mean you're an advocacy group. I know that the term when people hear the term lobbyist, they think you're a lobbyist, but that's not really the point of it. We have a legal requirement to be on that lobbyist registration. So any of the work that we do in terms of consultation with the government, we are on the lobbyist, we are on that registry, as well as that with the City of Toronto. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions here in the chat. And I think, and we're at 2:33, so I think we're near the end.
Okay, well, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn, which has been moved by OA member Melisa O'Day of Toronto and seconded by Tina Leong of Toronto. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at the OAA's AGM. Have a wonderful day, and we'll close today's meeting once again by recognizing the newly licensed members. But again, just before we do, if you haven't already done so, please take the time to register for this year's conference, Designing for Dignity. I'm going to be there, and so I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you as you can make it out. See you in Sudbury. And again, please stay tuned for a few more minutes to review those names if you didn't get a chance to see them earlier. Thanks again, and have a good afternoon, everyone.